We are stoked.
I'm a terrible sore loser. I don't follow the rules.
All the bearded guys seem to lie. Yeah.
There are rumors galore.
I am so up and down in my emotions right now.
Retain salary.
Okay. Where there is smoke, there is always fire, etc., etc., etc.
You don't do it.
Been there, done that.
And we'll get into it later.
They know crap about hockey.
Come on. Well, I laugh it off.
I have no issue.
Here's the thing, though. I have nothing.
I'm okay with this deal.
There was no other option.
So now you have nothing.
We already blew it.
Win now, win now.
It paid off.
I will eat my pants.
Hey guys, it's Two Guys in Hockey Talk. I'm Pavel the Cat Sigmund, and I've got my beautiful beardless co-host.
Hey, it's Revenev, Evan Reynolds at your service again tonight with another Two Guys. Which episode are we on tonight, man?
We are on episode 24, season 3. If you're checking us out just for the first time, make sure to go back and check out our previous episodes. Evan, it's a jam-packed show for us tonight.
Hey, yeah, it's gonna be a ring a ding dang dongy.
If you guys are hearing things on the background, it's just because of all the noise and chaos, the free agent frenzy. I mean, essentially the trade deadline that's happening. But before we begin, grab your beverage.
You betcha, man. Here we go.
Cheers. We hope you're doing well at home. And we've got a jam-packed show. We've got a lot going on. What's been going on with you, Evan? How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing good. I'm just wrapping up work a little bit later here. I'm at the beautiful new palatial studios of Two Guys in Hockey Talk. I'm trying to put together. I will say, by next week, I may not be able to afford this unless we get some new sponsors.
I'm scrounging out all the pennies and dimes that I can find in between my couch love seat.
All right. Hey, I just want to mention to everyone, we've been talking about the prospect stuff. I know we kind of were talking around this time, so we don't want to be talking too much about the prospects. I wanted to get past the trade deadline and all the stuff going on. We've been building up for this for weeks. You can never be too early for trade deadline. Everyone just loves a rumor. So we're still a couple weeks away from some of that kind of stuff we'll be bringing, but we will give you a week's notice in advance when we start hitting on prospects. So all you guys that don't give a crap, then just don't watch that week.
Yeah. So there are some big news out of hockey, which we'll get to and try to kind of talk about every little thing that's been happening. I know there's been some rumors flying around, some potential trades with some movements, some signings. But one of the big things that has been out this past week, and there's been a lot of vocalization about it, is the Heritage Classic and the potential cross-check with Austin Matthews on Rasmus Dahlin and Buffalo Sabres. Now, of course, they lost. Peter Mrazek, what is up with their goaltending there? It's been struggling, right? Yep. Toronto keeps pounding away, and they just can't find the answers. Exactly. That's what's been happening. But, he got 2 suspensions for the cross-check to the neck. Was it warranted? Did it deserve? What are your thoughts, Ed?
Okay, so it was interesting because you know how the first thing they do on social media is everyone shows by Matthews. It doesn't show what Dahlin was doing to him ahead of time. Now, it's 100%. Easy for, I hate this whole thing in fast, when it's in real time, it's like psychological time versus real time. We see everything in a slow replay and fans get all over the place. At first I looked and go, whoa, I've never seen Matthews that mad. But we also don't know what was happening throughout the game I didn't watch the whole game, but I saw some other plays. There were some cheap shots. It wasn't just Dahlin. And in front of that net, now he didn't get hit the same way. So to me, he deserves something because of what happened. But I think 2 games is fair to a guy who has no history of this. I mean, I'm going to guess that maybe you think that Matthew should have got more?
No, I agree with that. 2 suspensions was a fair amount. I mean, we rarely agree on this show, which is a highlight. So that's pretty impressive.
I'm turning my keys out the door, man. We're done with our show. We just keep agreeing.
But the only reason is because he is a first-time offender. He is a bit of a superstar. the problem is that, say what you want about previous calls, whether they were missed or not, you know, the game is very fast, and we've talked about reffing and some of the things that have happened in the past, but you can't cross-check a guy in the net, regardless of what had happened before, you know, and I think that that's something you want to get out of the game. He could have injured, you know, Darlene. I mean, you know, good for Darlene for sticking up to, you know, Matthews. And I know Matthews has been pushed around a little bit and pounding away.
Just keep going, man.
Yeah. And I know that Toronto isn't really known for that kind of gritty, in-your-face game like a Calgary, like a St. Louis, you know, that really pushes you around, you know, like a Boston, you know, where they, you know, rag you around, you know, playing like a Tom Wilson style. But, you know, he wanted to stand up for himself, and he deserved it. And he went for the wrong spot. Now, we have to remember, Matthews is like 6'3", 6'4", like he's a big guy.
Exactly.
And that there is a height difference because, you know, Zdeno Chara did, you know, cross-check, who was it, Max Pacioretty years ago, you know, Montreal versus Boston, that rivalry. And there wasn't really much done after that, even though that injured Pacioretty for quite a while. But, you know, I think it's fair. I think people, you know, need to stop comparing it to what happened with Corey Perry and John Tavares last year, with some of the other calls with Ben Sherratt, who's in the news for trade rumors, what he did to Wayne Simmons. I know there's a lot of calls that are missed. Again, the game is fast. There's a lot going on. There's the battle in front of the net. Matthews was in the crease for Anderson, you know. So, you know, you want to get out of the crease, you know. If it was Mike Smith in net, he'd probably throw a few gloves himself.
So let's look at this though. I think that this is so timely. Like, what's 2 games to Matthew? I mean, yeah, it can kind of affect maybe, you know, the fact he's going to get a few less goals, 2, 3 less goals maybe because he's not playing these games. But let's think about what can happen when now you know that Matthews will not put up with this kind of crap on the ice with these guys. I mean, I know we're sitting there and we're calling him out, but people are looking at Darlene. It's just, he was like this and like this and like this.
Yeah.
They're down low and they're hitting their backs. You keep hitting a person like that and keep pounding and pounding. I'm just laughing.
Exactly.
But let's face it. What you need to do is make space. And if we go back to the days when people forget about Mark Messier. Messier would take his stick and he'd stick you. He'd take his elbows and he'd elbow you. And this is a guy who's considered one of the best leaders. He's a guy who's set records around the world, one of the best NHL players to ever play, like within like top 25 or top, say, whatever in your minds. But I actually think this will help come playoff time. You don't mess with I was going to say Mark Messier. You don't mess with Austin Matthews unless you want to stick to the net because he's prepared to pay the price.
Very true. Very true.
I think good for him. I sometimes think that some of these superstars, they keep getting pounded on. They don't get protected. And I think defensemen get away with that. And now I'm going to go back really quick and just... Here's my little rant for today. Last year in the playoffs, we kept seeing bang, bang, constantly. Stuff that's called should have been cross-checking constantly in the playoffs. They never called this kind of stuff. And now we're complaining about something like this when players are constantly doing it and getting away with it. And if they get away with it, it's time that somebody stands up for themselves because they're tired of getting hurt. You just don't see it. That's all.
Yeah, and you have to really kind of look at the duration, the frequency, and the timing or the intensity even of the cross check. Like, is it happening very intensively? Is it against a vulnerable place on the body, or is it just against the back where you're just trying to move a guy against the boards because the puck is kind of stuck there and you're trying to get it out of your zone, right? So it definitely is questionable. We've talked about, you know, earlier on this season how the cross-checking rule was brought in to be more implemented this year. You know, they tried it in the preseason, and we talked about how you were wrong, which is a beautiful thing, and I was right, and how they didn't enforce it because they don't care. But if you want to grow the sport like the NBA, you got to protect your stars. And Austin Matthews is in one of the best markets out there, and he is promoting the game. He has his own brand. He has his own style. And he is turning into the face of the franchise, just like McDavid amongst one of the others. And he is flashy. He is American. We've talked about that dynamic of being a Canadian versus American in the league and how he shows off. He's got friends with celebrities, right? That being said, you do have to punish that behavior because it's not wrong. However, it comes down to how is the game managed by the refs? And I think that's where it comes down to, where refs need to be accountable somehow for what happens during a game. Why did they call A or why did they call B? And explain that. Even a quick rule. They did it for when they do suspensions, and I think it was under Brian Burke, where they would release a video and say, "Here's Exhibit A. This is what happened. We're gonna. This is why we deem this."
They showed the video, right? They showed the video.
Yes.
Brendan,
and a little detailed description.
Brendan Shanahan, when he came into player safety department, it was that.
Sorry, whoever it may have been. I remember it was common, and I think that still needs to happen.
Yeah, exactly. What happened to, that's why they called him Banishan or something like that for, it was something kind of weird. But I remember that, and I liked it. I could still disagree with it, but it actually here's a good point. Instead of us just arguing it should have been, it shouldn't have been, they actually took a play, and you could see how they looked at things differently. And visually, by letting us see why they call it what they did, it actually was entertaining. It actually added to the entertainment of the game. So the safety department brings out and explains all their stuff. I think it was done because they felt they were educating a lot of people outside of hockey markets, regular traditional hockey market. But I loved it, and I think that it should come back, because I want to see how they rate and give punishments for even stuff like goaltenders. When they're
goalie interference.
Yeah. Like I don't know. I guess not just safety department. I like to see when they make big calls that cost games and to explain behind themselves, but that's never going to happen. So,
well, and there was some recent questionable calls in a few games, especially in overtime, where a few missed calls on whether it was too many men slashing, hooking. Edmonton versus Washington, Toronto and Arizona. Austin Matthews again by Jacob Chitrin, who ended up scoring the game-winning goal. There was a game between, I believe, the Sharks and Anaheim had four men on, and they ended up winning that game, which, again, costly points at this time of the year. We're in the final leg of the season. Anything can happen. So, reffing, again, is going to be continually a topic of contention for fans. I can't say the same about GMs. Who knows what they're discussing. You guys can give us a call. Any 32 GMs listening right now, feel free to give two guys a call. We always love your insight. But in general, I do want to applaud the NHL for putting on the Heritage Classic. It was a beautiful show, albeit a little cold, I heard from some people who were attended in Hamilton. And for all the Hamilton residents, unfortunately, I don't think you'll be getting an NHL team anytime soon. However, you never know what happens with Arizona, so you can always have a glimmer of hope.
Don't start that again. Well, speaking of cold, no one had cold like the original Heritage Classic.
Yes.
It's funny because it's now about to come back to Edmonton. I think in the famous words of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, finally, Lily. The Heritage is coming back.
Who is your dream Who is your dream opponent for Edmonton to face if they were to host the 20th anniversary of that game?
It's got to be Calgary for the best opponent. But you know what? I think they're going to go back to the Montreal Canadiens as far as rehashing the very same thing. I really don't want them to do it. There's not a huge clash between those two. It's never been a big history. I don't think it's anything exciting. I definitely think you got to have a game against Calgary and Edmonton right here in Alberta.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah,
I think that would make it. So on top of that, Toronto's dealing with some goaltending problems. What are your thoughts on Peter Mrazek? We've had Cassidy Sauvé on last week. We've talked about goaltending. What is he doing, and why is he not tending the net?
So that's interesting because who is the goalie that got traded over to
Frederick Anderson?
No,
to
no,
Carolina hurt
yeah,
him.
no. I mean, like, yeah. Now Frederick's playing well, right? It's just like he's had a great season, and I mean, everyone thought, well,
Vesna like
yeah. I mean, things change. It's as Cassidy Sauve said on our show last week. You know, when she was talking about, it's like you can't stop a beach ball. You know, and then it's just like everything is the size of a beach ball, and it's easy to stop. You know, a lot of times. And so as a goalie, I agree. We talked about that with Cassidy, that you got to have fun in the game. I'm worried about the Toronto goaltenders, period, that the fun of the game is out because of the stress and the pressure that is put on them. So it's put on by themselves, it's put on by their fans, it's put on by media. I mean, and they know they're limited for amount of time. I think Edmonton runs into the same thing. And so they just stop having fun. Edmonton's massive losing streak, which was totally not predicted in any way of any sort,
up and down.
had a lot to do. There's issues, but a lot of it had to do, I think, with just gripping your sticks tight. You can see that with players when they go through a bad year. And goaltenders, I think, are the same. And somehow they got to get out of their own mind. To play out of your mind, you got to get out of your mind. Get it? Okay.
Fair enough. Nope.
I think
You're the expert on goaltending, not me here. So I'll give you that bone.
Yeah. But I will say that I actually think that you know, if you're a Maple Leaf fan, just give it a little time. I think they'll work their way through it. They're in a good spot. They have right now is the time to go through these problems in these next 10 games. If they can give them up to 10 more games, and then if they can start building themselves back into the place they need to be for the playoffs, you know, so I think we'll be in a good spot. So, hey, speaking of that, so there's been a bunch of stuff that's just coming down in the last couple days here with trades. I was thinking about Toronto. Are they going to go out and grab a Foligno this year, or what's happening? So what do we know that's happened?
So far, well, Thomas Hertl out of San Jose has signed an 8x8, a little bit more with first 3 years of full movement clause deal, and then later on a partial movement clause where, you know, he would dictate where he wants to go. So good for them. I know that there's been some rumblings about Hertl potentially being moved just because of what it is, and I know we're probably going to go through all the teams in the coming weeks here, just kind of going through.
San Jose needs that, don't they? San Jose needed to hold on to him for their fans.
Because he is a valuable asset to their team. That being said, they have quite a few big contracts on that team, whether it's Carlson, Couture, Brett Burns, you know, that there's some questionable things as to what is it that San Jose's doing. You know, they started the season strong, and then they've kind of fallen off. Their goaltending also is kind of mixed. You know, they've had a few injuries, and, you know, they're kind of falling where they're kind of in a retool, I would say. But, you know, any San Jose fans, please let us know what your thoughts are, what you'd like to see. It's sounding like Ben Sherratt is heading over to the Florida Panthers. I've got behind me. And it looks like they traded him for a first-round pick in 2023 and a fourth-round pick in 2022, plus the prospect Ty, and I apologize if I mispronounced this, Ty Smilanic. So
interesting. You know, this has been talked about by a lot of the insiders, different people. When you trade early, you get a player early, you pay a premium. I am shocked that Sherratt gets a first. I don't think that that's going to make a difference in the playoffs.
I think it's an overpay.
Like, I like Sherratt. He's a good player, but he's an average player. He's a depth player, and a first round. I mean, they're pushing. They're pushing to make a push on this. But if you wait right up to that deadline, you wait to the end of this weekend, where you're going to not pay the same price. So they're early because they want the player.
That's true, but as Bill Zito, as the GM there, he's risking it all. You know, Florida's on a hot season this year. You know, they're really pushing. They've had incredible depth up front. You know, they can really score. Their defense is solid. Probably not one of the best, but solid enough to make a few rounds. Now, granted, this team hasn't beaten first round in quite a few years, so you know that's going to be a big uphill battle, especially since they have to go up against either Toronto, which I know have their own woes but can still score. You have Tampa Bay, so the Battle of Florida should be exciting if they face each other again. And then, of course, you've got Boston, who's creeping up in the standings, and they've really turned it on because of what Brad Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak have been able to do, right? And they have some depth there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that division, as well as, Washington can, surprise some people. Carolina's on fire. What will they do? And I think they're just going all in, and Bill Zito believes in his team, and I think they consider themselves a cup contender, and we'll see how it goes. Now, I question the goaltender and whether Bobrovsky can really win a round or two, but we'll see. We're still around, I guess. And Spencer Knight is unproven.
Yeah. Well, and I have no real concerns about their goaltending situation. Actually, my concerns are about their defense still. I get why they went after Sherrod. I just don't think they have a solid enough defense to go around. I mean, teams are coming in and getting a lot of shots on net. They're giving room into the defensive zone. They're giving up that time because they got great forwards that spend a lot of time in the offensive zone. They're getting good possession. I just they have a lot of gap space. I've noticed in a couple games that I've watched in the last couple weeks here that surprised me. And I'm worried when you give up first rounds right now. But I get it, man. You got to make a move. It's just that they're dealing with Carolina and Tampa, especially. Those top three teams are kind of and Colorado, right? So those are kind of your four teams that.
Well, they wouldn't have to face Colorado.
No, I'm not talking about facing. I'm talking about to win it this year.
Oh, yes.
So.
Now the other big trade that has just come down the pipes just a little bit earlier is that Seattle traded with Calgary, and Calle Yarncroke is heading over to Calgary with 50% of salary retained by Seattle, but they're sending over a 2022 second round pick, which they got from Florida a while back, 2023 third round pick, and 2024 seventh round pick. So, Calgary is doing a great job fleecing a little bit of Seattle. And what I'm hearing about from sources inside some of the clubs and some of the people, as if I know everything, is that there's not as much emphasis and value on this upcoming draft as there is next year. So I think teams are more willing to part ways with their first round pick this year just because of everything that's happening in the world. Potentially Russian players dropping down to the second, third, if not fourth or fifth, round. And of course, with the uncertainty of what's been going on in the world, not only with COVID, having players, there's just not as much faith in this upcoming draft. So Evan, you're going to lead us through this in the coming episodes and in a future episode, but it looks like Calgary is also building up, and apart from Colorado and maybe St. Louis, I don't really know who can challenge in the West besides Calgary.
Man, I think. I mean, you always got your long shots, right?
Yes.
I mean,
you got your Minnesota Wild. You got your, potentially.
Yeah. You got St.
Dallas
Louis
is still fighting.
St.
Louis is my wild horse or wild card because they're pretty solid. My question for St. Louis is where's the scoring going to come from? They need a scorer. They need and I know Tarasenko's had a solid year, and Jordan Kyrou has been a phenomenal addition.
So I will say it's the dark horse, and it's been said many times, and I'm not saying it because I live in the city of Edmonton. Edmonton is a dark horse based on their goaltending. And not their defense. Their defense is what it is. It's going to let up chances. If their goaltending gets hot at playoff time, they have a chance. I don't see them getting into the Cup finals, but I definitely do see them winning at least one or two rounds because of their they have a plethora of guys up front that can literally light it up. And sometimes with hockey, if you just get the right matchups. But I mean, I'll tell you, one thing that I hope doesn't happen is we don't see an opening round playoff of Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. That is not worthy of a first round. That's a second round, because that would be so sad to have to witness, two teams just giving it all and seeing an actual battle of Alberta right away.
That would be the best thing I ever watch on TV, I think.
In first round?
Yeah. Well, come on. We
So
had
if you're
Battle
an
of Florida
Oilers
last
fan,
year.
if you're an Oilers fan, do you want to take on the playoff bound hot steaming Flames because
Yes.
your Oilers are
Yes.
out and now it's going to affect everything you do? And if
Yes.
you're a Flame fan, you don't want to be taking on the Oilers because of the fact that what if they just get hot in that first round and have a good series
Yes.
to get through, right? So
Yes.
I'm going to say that I don't think, and if you're an Oilers fan on here, or give us your thoughts. Do you think a first round is good for the Oilers? If you're a fan of the Oilers, I think it's not good. I don't think that they're going to be set up to win in the playoffs when there's less penalties being taken because they're not going to call them, right?
Yeah.
And I think their goaltending is still too questionable. And there is nobody out there that's going to be better than what they got right now. That's the problem without paying something.
100%. 100%.
So
Now, I do
right,
want to.
really, there's only Colorado and Calgary in the West, though, as far as a really good shot at coming out of there to be the top contenders. So I
100%.
I predict Calgary, Colorado. I'll call it right now. That's going to be your Western Conference final.
It's hard. They may face each other in the second round. Now, the one thing I will mention, because again, playoffs aren't set in stone, and I don't want certain fan bases to get upset, but Vegas
How can
may
they
or may
each
not
other in
make
the
it
second round? They're both first place teams.
because it depends. Because depends on who they would play in the first round.
If both teams win theirs, they would meet together. Guys, correct me if I'm wrong. You guys do the math. We're just two guys here talking hockey.
We are talking hockey. Now, I do want to mention that first, Vegas, they still may make the playoffs, but they have been on a bit of a spiral downfall, and I don't know what's happening. Is this the Jack Eichel effect or whatnot? We just saw Buffalo beat Toronto in the Heritage Classes, and they're going to face off Edmonton, and they've been rolling along, and I think, Alex Tuck has been a phenomenal addition to that team, but Eichel, he made some comments that we can discuss later on, but really, that team is struggling, and it's goaltending. And, they really could use a goalie like Marc-Andre Fleury, and I think it's stupid they traded away for him. I get why, and I know that Chicago's now asking for a first-round pick, even though he was traded for a seventh-round pick. So really, they're going to win on this trade. And the other team that I want to kind of mention, because I'm wearing the jersey, is the Pittsburgh Penguins, because they are a running machine, and I can never count Crosby and Malkin out. However, they haven't won a round or in a while in the last, I think, 2-3 years. They've struggled. So I don't know what to expect from them in the playoffs. What are they going to do? Are they going to go in for someone? I know they were interested in Sherrod. He was kind of a Berkey kind of player. But what will Ron Hextall do? So just FYI, the playoffs aren't set yet. We're just predicting of who has the most potential. And I agree. I think Calgary, Colorado are the two best options from the West. But if that is the case, then I really consider that maybe the East will take it again this year. As you predicted, potentially Tampa.
Do you know what's interesting, actually, when you talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins and the playoffs and what they need? One of the things that they talked about is they needed bigger D to kind of come in and handle it. And this is really interesting. I don't know anything that's going on behind the scenes. If someone knows, well, they know more than me, I guess. But right now, Mark Giordano, we know he's not going to Calgary. I know he has a bit of a contract still this year, but Pittsburgh has been very creative over the years at finding their own people. But if they could find a way and maybe make a side deal where it could be signing them for another year or two, Pittsburgh does stuff like that, and they've done it over the years. A guy like Mark Giordano and his experience and what he could bring to that that defense on that team, could be so invaluable for them. I haven't heard any rumors, so I just want to state that out right now. It just makes sense if there's a way to move salary. And remember, you're dealing with Seattle, which means they can absorb only half, though, in this case. They can't take, so it would maybe have to be a third team or move. But, man, Pittsburgh's the one team that can trade away people, and they're probably one of the best at developing star players or good role players in the entire league.
Yeah. Now, again, what is their goaltending going to be like? Because Tristan Jarry wasn't good enough last year, and Casey Smith is your typical backup.
He's good this year. That's why they're where they are.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But there's also been some rumblings of the former GM there, Jim Rutherford, who's now out in as an advisor in Vancouver, that they've been interested in John Marino out in Pittsburgh. So would there be a possible trade? No,
I can't see it, man. They love John Marino down over there in Pittsburgh. I mean, they would. I think they'd have to be out of their mind to make that trade, unless I guess, what if they can get something for a good playoff run, because they are trying to win with those guys.
Yeah, 100%.
I guess if they feel like it's going to make a difference. So hypothetically, we're here right now. Let's be an armchair. This is just armchair GM. This is not this is us coming up with something. And if we're right, well, then you guys need to hire us out there, all you NHL team. So
I could use a new job.
Who could, if they want John Marino and they really want to sweeten the pot to get him over there, who could go over to Pittsburgh?
Brock Besner or JT Miller.
Okay, so let's just say Besner has a contract. It's not due yet, right?
It is. It's coming. I believe
he's an RFA. But JT Miller is a UFA.
That is correct. No, he's got one more year. He's got one more year, and then he's a UFA.
Miller has one more year, does he? You guys, we'll check this.
I'm going to double check
while I'm talking. Okay, so what if they need defense? So could they, now they're going to have to send something more back, so we can just imagine this. If you send John Marino and a larger contract and then get one of Miller and or Besner with Tyler Myers. They like to unload him, but he's a big guy.
So he's got one more year after this at 5.25, and then he's a UFA, whereas Besner's up this season as an RFA. I was right. I clearly know more about hockey than you do.
Yeah, don't brag too much, because you're going to look pretty bad next week when you know absolutely nothing about hockey again.
Probably true.
Okay, so potentially, I'm saying find someone in Pittsburgh that's got a bigger contract you need to unload. Send them with John Marino as the prime catch. They're going to unload, let's just say, JT Miller, because he could fit in for one more year in Pittsburgh, and bring Tyler Myers to replace John Marino. But you got to remove money on the other end, and maybe someone has to absorb a little cap.
One person that I think is on the move, maybe not right now by the trade deadline, but definitely in the offseason, I could see it, is Kasperi Kapanen. He's not been a good fit. Pittsburgh has not been very happy with him. His work ethic, he's been tried up and down the lineup. He was supposed to be a top 6 winger, and, he thrived pretty good as a top 9 winger in Toronto, but, they traded him away. And I know initially there was some bitterness in Toronto about it, but it clearly worked for the better because of what was taking place. And, I mean, who knows what will take place. Now, again, there's so many teams. There's 32 teams that there's so many trades that are possible.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go through a whole slew of things that could be traded. And there's a lot of rumblings and rumors depending on, where you look and who you listen to.
Yeah.
So definitely Pittsburgh is one of those teams to keep an eye out. Maybe they low-key do nothing. And sometimes I got to make the argument, and this is my kind of thought process, is that, Ken Holland talked about this last year, where you don't always have to make a trade to make your team better, because very few teams who actually make a trade go on to win the Stanley Cup, or it benefits them in a good manner, right? So is it worth giving up assets for the future in order to win now?
Yeah.
It depends, right? Like how willing are you to do that, right? Can you find that balance? And that's what makes you an excellent GM.
Yeah, and I think that's what they've been balancing for years in Pittsburgh, and it's worked for some of them. But I think Pittsburgh you do need to.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And the reason I say that is that they need to is because we know that the careers of Malkin, Letang, and because we don't know about contracts next year, but also Crosby, let's just say they're all going to stay there, right? And if they did, They still believe that they can win. You have limited time. So I think sometimes you do have to say, let's just go all in instead of just letting everyone go and trying to get the best assets. Because there's something to be said about players retiring in a city. We're always trying to unload them, say, well, get something rather than nothing. But yet just 3 years ago, right, we're just like thinking that they shouldn't abandon us and shouldn't go somewhere else. And everyone's so selfish. So I really believe that, and this is just me, like Giordano never should have had to leave Calgary. I think that that's a sad story. It could have been retirement this year or one more contract of a year or two, even at a lower price or something, right? So I always worry about that. Like Sidney Crosby should never play for another team and try to get something out of him because he's still really good. I think that he will always be a Pittsburgh Penguin.
I would only add one caveat, which would be the icing on the cake, is if he went back to Anaheim for the team that wanted to draft him when he first came into the league, and instead he went to Pittsburgh. Can you imagine how angry Berkey would be?
Oh, you're talking because of the draft lottery that year.
Yeah, because they thought they're going to get Crosby. And, imagine if, Crosby did play in Anaheim for all those years, what would have happened. But really, think about it. If he went back there for just one season, oh, man.
I just want to mention before we go into a couple other little things here too is, I'm going to mention it again for the Oiler fans when they're talking about what they're going to do. I know there's a lot of rumors around Kubalik from Chicago. So I've heard things joking saying, oh, that's the extra money we retained for Duncan, so they're going to eat half of the money for Kubalik and send them our way for future considerations, right? Kind of thing. But, but I am going to tell anyone, if they got Kubalik, say goodbye to Yamamoto or Puljujarvi, unless they're going to try and treat him out as an RFA. So it would be interesting. However, just coming back on the defense, without what's out there now, it still sits at Justin Braun and Carson Soucy if Edmonton picks up one defenseman. But don't expect nothing else. The only goalie that will get brought to Edmonton, if there was anything, let me say there could be a potential of a second. The one was Marc-Andre Fleury, and that would be them doing some fancy talking like they did with Puljujarvi and finding a way to convince Fleury to come because he's got a proven playoff. And then the second goalie would be if Dallas says, you know what, we're just going to not worry about this year, and they can maybe pick up Braden Holtby for the rest of the year. That would be the possibility. So I don't think it's going to happen either, but that's the only other thing. Otherwise, Edmonton's better to stick with what they got.
I think that they can still go for Vinay Husso out in St. Louis. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Just because he's a UFA at the end of the year, and they've signed Bennington to a longer term, and that's supposed to be their goalie. And would you not want to, we talked about this earlier, but he's not retiring. He's just in this entry-level deal. Would you not want to get assets for someone who may just walk in the summer?
Not someone who you're going to have to maybe play in the playoffs as a potential. I don't see. I think they'll consider Husso as a rental, because what you're going to get for him, how much would it cost to go get that kind of backup goalie that can actually win for you in the playoffs if Binnington goes down? So I think it'll be
the other one you didn't mention, and there's some big questions, is in Ottawa, and whether it's Anton Forsberg or Gustafsson plus Matt Murray. I mean, I know Matt Murray now is out, and he had a better season than he had last year. He signed that big contract for 4 years, but really, who's your starter in Ottawa? Because one of those goalies is definitely going to be could potentially be a starter somewhere else, right? So there's definitely, there's a lot of movement. Now, the other thing I did want to mention also is that Klingberg is probably off the market just because of Heiskanen getting mono and being out. So you can't lose another top-end defenseman and not compete for a playoff spot like Dallas is doing. Okay,
so I'm going to come back. You and I are back and forth, and we don't agree on this Dallas thing. Dallas is going nowhere even if they make the playoffs. They're right on that edge, on that end of the playoff. They're going to be a number 7 or 8 team at best if they can compete for what they got. I think that Klingberg is still all about negotiations. And if they know they don't have much chance, then they're going to have to pay too high a price. They're not worried about this year. They're not a team they're not a contender. So why would you worry if you can get something really good? But I will say, if Klingberg goes, this is a first round draft pick and a really good prospect.
But he's up this year, so it doesn't matter. So he walks at the end of the year.
No, he walks at the end of the year. Exactly. So why keep him? You want to trade him. You want to get something. That's what I'm saying. But everyone's saying they're going to hang on to Klingberg because with Heiskanen down, so they can make their playoff run. It doesn't make sense. You're going nowhere in the playoffs. So I think let's just use some logic. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, what would be the purpose when you get nothing and you don't go anywhere in the playoffs? If you even make the bloody playoffs, it doesn't make any sense. I think
if you follow Revenev on Twitter, then you know that you're going to get bashed by all the Dallas fans right now because he doesn't think we're going to make it and do blah, 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 And so don't at me at Evan at Revenenergs, but also give him a follow because he's got some good material on there. I'm sorry, but Dallas, whether they go or not, they could be a dark horse as well because of the fact that they just went to the Stanley Cup final 2 years ago. They re-signed Joe Pavelski for one more year, who's been phenomenal. Jason Robertson has been an outstanding player for them as a young player. He's been doing really well, and playing a little bit better than his brother Nick out in Toronto. Granted, he hasn't had the same opportunity. And so in my mind, I think Dallas is retooling, but they could still make a good push. And I wouldn't be surprised if they made an impact. And I think Dallas can do damage, but it also depends on if they make the playoffs. And they're right in it. And again, my biggest question right now about the West is Vegas. What will Vegas do? Because you've got Edmonton, Vancouver, Dallas, Nashville, all around that same area. And they're all clawing away at being able to be in the playoffs.
So I would say don't listen to Pavel the Cat when it comes to Dallas. He thought Joe Pavelski will where is he going to sign next year? I said he was staying. I knew, so he knows absolutely nothing about the Dallas stuff. He may know about other teams, but not that one. Anyway, I'm joking, guys. I digress. But yeah, no, absolutely. It's a poop show in the middle there, right? Because we're a PG rated show sometimes. But yeah, okay. So hey, let's talk about Vegas. What is the chance, the minute chance, that they still find a way to bring Fleury back, even though they said no, and that they wouldn't be bringing him back because they're struggling so much? Is there a way they could even find to move some salary cap? I mean, I don't even know how to even do it.
Yeah, they made Jack Eichel work. They can make anything work. The fact that Mark Stone got on LTIR with his back, which, again, back problems are very serious, and it really can take you out of the game. They'll make it work. They're sniffing around.
So
right? And just like Tampa, they'll be X amount of dollars over the cap. Those will
here's the problem I want to bring up with Marc-Andre Fleury. Here's the problem, because I don't know the loophole. Some way you guys might know the cap really well. Mention it, put it in the comments, say something, even if you're watching this later on, if you don't see it written already. But my understanding is there was certain cap that was eaten early on, and how the movement, when you trade a player within a trading year, I do not think Chicago can do it, which would mean you'd have to bring Seattle or Ottawa or some other team that wants to eat the cap and get something for it. I think it's too hard. I think that when they got Eichel, they knew he might not be back at this time. I think they've had too many players injured, and I actually think that they're going to look like they're getting somewhere, but they're prepared to miss the playoffs for 1 year. That's my prediction.
I don't think so. I think there's an expectation from ownership to go all the way. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They've gotten rid of a lot of players, a lot of draft picks, and they've really thrown it all in to go for it. And what their motto was cup in the first 5 years. Well, we're in year 5, which is crazy to think of Vegas. And they are on the cusp of potentially missing their first playoffs. Now, they may miss it and then come back next year stronger than ever. I mean, injuries plague every team. You can't, portray for that. I wonder about the coaching and Peter DeBoer, and is he the right fit for a championship team? I like Peter DeBoer as a human. He's a great coach, but he's never been able to get a lot of the teams he's coached over the hump, right?
Then why did they bring him in? They got rid of Gallant to bring DeBoer.
Well, look how well Gallant is doing in New York.
I know. I think you and I agreed, and in fact, we were shocked that Seattle didn't go after Gallant. He was the perfect candidate. And I'd like to say there was a lot of media out there that was pushing for Gallant. Let's move over to the Rangers. Let's talk about them.
Yes.
Gallant. I remember when they were making the move, and I'm not going to mention the names that were all over on their social media and talking about how it's such a bad decision. You don't get a coach like Gallant in. They need to get the young guys, and oh my goodness, I was like, they are bringing Gallant in. They need to turn this team around. They need to actually teach structure, et cetera, et cetera. And now, of course, it helps when you have a goalie, a Vezina, contending goalie, one of the best goalies to play, percentage-wise, as far as their save percentage and wins in the NHL in 30 years.
Yes.
I mean, that is nuts. Okay, let's talk about the Rangers. What's some thoughts on them?
First off, they are a goalie factory machine. The fact that they've been blessed with Brian Leetch, Henrik Lundqvist, and now Igor Shesterkin. I mean,
okay,
there's no credence to Alexander Georgiev and some of the others that have gone through, but to have like nonstop solid goaltending.
I just want to correct you because there's a bunch of people thinking right now something weird. You said Brian Leetch, he's a defenseman. You meant Victor. I know what you meant.
Yes, sorry. This is why I admit I know nothing about hockey, right?
Yeah, they played at the same time. They played at the same time. That makes sense. So, okay, anyway, keep going.
So they know how to produce goaltender. Now, one of the biggest things we've talked about previously with other teams is that they've had a lot of first-round draft picks, right? And they may not have come to fruition completely, but they've been able to better themselves this year and grow into that role. They may not be the studs that you expect, like the Connor McDavids, the Austin Matthews, the McKinnons. But, Alex Lafreniere, he's one of the best 5-on-5 producers for that team right now. So he is a solid player. They had to get rid of Buchnevich, which was a hard loss, but they brought in some other guys, and that team knows how to score. Now, granted, you have Jacob Trouba, who's having an unreal season, and that's one of the reasons why Winnipeg is struggling is because they lost that whole left side. And Jacob Trouba, when he signed that contract, I thought it was a little bit much, but he's been playing up to par. He is physical, has some of the biggest hits this year, clean hits. If you want to see a good clean hit, watch Jacob Trouba in the Rangers uniform because he is dynamite to watch. And you have some solid centers. You have Panarin, as some people like to say, and he's an elite winger, albeit he's not doing as well as he did last year where he was in the conversation for Hart. You have Zibanejad, who is an elite center. You have Ryan Strome, who's been able to play solid, and you have Ryan Reeves, whose dad has been on the show, great player, physical presence, knows how to move bodies. He pounds his way through the ice. But I like the Rangers in terms of what they are. Their goaltending has definitely gotten them a few extra wins, which goes to show you it's the same thing whether it's Toronto or Edmonton or Vancouver, where a goaltender can steal you a win or two and you should buy him dinner because of how well he plays. But I like the Rangers. I don't think they're a cup contender, but I think in 2 to 3 years, they're going to be very difficult to get by.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, 100%. The Rangers are one of those teams that are definitely up and coming. It's going to be interesting on how they're going to manage some stuff in the cap space. I will say everything I'm hearing about Lafreniere is that like 5-on-5, he is phenomenal. And he's worked so hard on his defensive game is what we hear. And he hasn't got a lot of chances. But Gerard Gallant does not give you opportunities unless you earn them. And I'm a little worried for a first-round pick and I even rated him high. I am shocked. I feel like it's the system. I think he would do much better elsewhere. But they believe he's going to come around. So what I would say is we need to see a player that's close to a point per game at least next year. Otherwise, I'd be quite concerned about this player this far in. And I will say, this is what I believe COVID did to a lot of development of some of these young guys. I'm even
100%.
worried about this year, his draft pick, Shane Wright, so who's projected to go first overall. The development that he missed out on the other year, it looked really good in the Ivan Halinka when he was playing with a whole bunch of the other guys, but getting back, he was okay, but it just like when you miss that much time, and he played limited over in Europe when he did get a chance to get some games in. So I think that that's part of the thing that's kind of happened with these guys. I'm worried that Capo Caco is kind of the Jesse Puljujarvi situation. He almost needed another year or two of just developing. But interesting. It is so interesting. Finnish players, I was doing a search. I don't have all the stats to give you guys, but going through approximately 100 different players that I did this in the last year here. I went through about 100 different players and just browsing through it, not putting all my stats down. It really looks like Finnish people are the ones for hockey to develop usually around 21 to 23. That's when they really come into their own very differently. And it doesn't matter what path they took, whether they stayed in Finland or came over. So
100%. And I think the best example you can have, and even coaching style, is the Carolina Hurricanes, who have a lot of Swedes on their team. Timo Teravainen, Kakaniemi, I believe it is. Jesper Kakaniemi, right? Like a lot of, Sebastian Aho, and some of these players, and you see how elite they can be. But it took a while, and whatever Rob Brind'Amour's doing with his system, it's making them work, because those players are very underrated in terms of how they produce. Granted, they have an elite blue line as well, but those forwards, they put up those numbers. And when we were creating the potential Team Finland Olympics roster, a lot of their players came from Carolina. So it goes to show you that Carolina knows how to develop Finnish players, and it's interesting to see what takes place. But yeah, with the Rangers, I don't know if Capo goes out this year, and I wonder if Strome will stay. You guys can let us know if you think he'll sign a big contract, because yes, the Rangers need to do some asset management, right? Especially since they got a new GM.
So it sounded like you said acid management, which means hopefully they don't have to do that kind of management. So, hey, I just want to mention we're coming up. We're going to wrap up. I'll let Pavel give some final thought here. I want to give my final thought just on for you guys on prospects. So let's step out of the NHL for just a moment. Interesting. I am so pumped right now and excited. We've mentioned on our site. We put it up there with Connor Bedard and what he's doing right now. So basically, if you look at his last 32 games, he has averaged more than 2 points per game in that time span. So he's sitting right now with 76 points in 48 games. But listen to this. His 48 games, he has 38 goals. Connor Bedard, he's 16 years old still. He is projected to finish. He doesn't have a lot of time left. He's only got like 14 more games. Right now, they're projecting him based, and that's in his early season slump, which wasn't really a slump, to have 98 points in only 62 games with 49 goals. I mean, this guy is, I am excited. I really hope, I'm going to be honest with you, I hope Matvei Mishkov gets himself out of Russia some way, somehow, so he can come play next season somewhere over in North America, whether in the USHL or in the CHL. Because if he gets over here, he has a shot to be drafted high. If not, I could see Mishkov going as low as between 5 and 10 overall, because they're worried about the Russian factor with what's happening.
I think that's more of a media speculation. What they're saying from inside, Darren Dreger was reporting, was that teams are still very happy to sign players and draft them and see how they go, because I think it's just a matter of publicity, because it's a business at the end of the day.
But that makes no sense, because we all know that right now teams have been very forward, and they've talked about, because they're always worried about players coming over that are playing in Russian leagues right now, and that was when things were going well. So that I don't feel like that's an accurate statement to make. If that's what I haven't heard him say that. But if he thinks it's not going to make a difference, it's going to make more of a difference than it's already made. They may take it, but if you're a team that needs someone and you think you got to wait 3 years, he's going to drop one or two. He's just going to drop, I'm telling you. We'll talk more about prospects. So, okay, final thoughts. We're well into overtime again.
Oh, wow, of course. 2 guys in overtime, as always. 2 things. First off, Ovi has finally surpassed Jaromir Jagr for 3rd all-time in goals. So congrats to Ovi, the grade 8. Probably, I think it's 33, 34 goals left to reach or if surpass Gordie Howe, who's at 801.
Wow.
So probably meet it by next season. So keep an eye out, because the fact that he scored from that same point just goes to show you that defense hasn't really changed in how many years? 15 years. And really, like, apart from Matthews and Draisaitl, who can really challenge for that many goals in a season, right? It's going to be very hard to do. So for that, and as well as to the rookie goaltender out in Toronto now, I'm going to butcher his name, Eric Skalgreen. Skalgreen? Shalgreen. I apologize.
Shalgren. I think Shalgren. That's okay.
Shalgren.
You practiced this before we came on the podcast, even.
Shalgren got his first shot at. Well, listen, practice doesn't make perfect, because I know nothing about hockey. So he ended up getting a shutout against the Dallas Stars. You know, so you were right, Evan. The Dallas Stars aren't going to the playoffs because they couldn't beat Toronto. So clearly, it's a bust. Right, but no, it was essentially good for the kid. It's a big expectation. It's a huge market. Of course, you know, you want to see everyone succeed, and you love good stories. We love good stories, but we hope that this is a bright future for this young man.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we on behalf of 2 Guys in Hockey Talk, we want to thank you for joining us today. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter. You can follow myself at Revenev. You can follow my partner. He represents our site for at hockey_2. I think it is hockey_2. So definitely come on. If you don't like what he's doing, just unfollow him after he's done. Or you can follow him and his cats on Instagram at Color Avenue. So, yeah, guys, also just put a thumbs out there. And, hey, we want to thank our ASAP partnership with what's happening. Follow us on ASAP if you're a part of ASAP. You can follow us on ours, but you make sure you stay on ASAP and keep following what they're doing. They got some great stuff happening. And so anyway, on behalf of 2 Guys in Hockey Talk, in the meantime and in between time,
keep your sticks on the ice, everyone. Stay safe.